Thank you, Bijol. Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupine avatara varisthaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. Sudhismriti purananam alayam karunalayam namami bhagavat padam shankaram lokashankaram. So we are discussing, right now we are discussing the second Mahavakya, that is Aham Brahmasmi, which comes in the Yajurveda, in the Shukla Yajurveda. It comes in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. The first chapter, the fourth Brahmana, which may be called section in the English translations. And the discussion begins with the seventh mantra, seventh, eighth, ninth. And this Mahavakya, Aham Brahmasmi, is found in the 10th mantra, 10th verse, so to speak. So we have to keep in mind the general principle that is applicable with regard to the hermeneutics of all the four Mahavakyas. That is, the literal meaning should not be taken. What we should consider is the implied meaning. Literal meaning is Vachyartham in Sanskrit, and the implied meaning is Likshyartham, what we actually try to imply. So in all these Mahavakyas, for example, they can find this application. In the Tattwamasi, for example, Tat, its literal meaning is Ishvara, or anthropomorphic monotheistic God. And its literal meaning of Tvam is this Jiva, this body-mind complex, and the Atman or Brahman within, the individual souls, individual selves, or Jiva. And its implied meaning is Kudastha Chaitanya, which means the divine principle that is the essence of this body-mind complex, what we call individual living beings, individual human beings. That is the implied meaning. Not the body-mind complex, but if you exclude the body-mind complex, which of course, which implies mind, mana, buddhi, chitta, ahankara, mind, intellect, and the memory system, and also the principle of identification of aham, that egoism, ego system. So when the Atman, the Brahman, reflects on this particular antakarana, or in a way we call this the internal organs, we get these individual jivas. For example, a pot full of water, it has got a reflection. The reflection is the individual jivas, and the reflecting medium is antakarana, mind, intellect, the memory system, and the ego system. And the reflection is called individual jiva. And what is reflected, the original prototype, the sun, let's say, is Brahman. So if you exclude, if you remove the pot and the water in the pot, the reflection disappears. Or if you remove the mirror, which is a reflecting medium, when you remove the mirror, the reflection disappears. But the prototype, the reality remains the same. So the reality is neither the reflection nor what is reflected in it. It's independent of everything, the real sun. It is not affected. Even if you place 8 billion mirrors, there may be 8 billion reflections, the entire humanity. But the Atman remains the same. That is the implied meaning. Now, in Aham Brahmasmi Mahavakya, that's again the same principle applies. Aham is Jiva, That is Vachyartham. And the Lakshyartham is Gudasa Chaitanya. And Brahman, of course, is the absolute reality. The literal meaning could be Ishvara. So this hermeneutical principle should be kept in mind. Now we are actually entering another important principle here. I want to take some of these very famous text statements from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. This is a very important discussion. In fact, if we don't understand this, we won't understand Vedanta. Actually, Aham Brahmasmi Mahavakya is more difficult to understand than it is the Mahavakya which corresponds to our experience. And it is much more profound, much more abstract, somewhat difficult to understand than Tattwamasi. So this reflection theory, it's called the Bimba Pradibimba-vada, the doctrine of the prototype, that is Bimba. Pradibimba is reflection, prototype, reflection, doctrine. And you know, this is the most well-known of the three important analogies normally employed by interpreting this Mahavakya. Another important analogy is a pot and a space within the pot and a space outside the pot. The space outside is Mahakasha, the space which is not, which doesn't appear to be limited, but the space within the pot appears to be limited. So called Antapravesha, Avachedavada, the doctrine called Avachedavada. The doctrine of reflection theory was held by a well-known philosopher who was a disciple of Shankaracharya. His name is Padmapada. And he wrote the well-known book Panchapatika, and it was interpreted by a great scholar who came close around the same time, where Prakasha Medi, he wrote the well-known book Panchapatika Vivaranam. And this Vivarana Prameya Sangraha was written by Vidyaranya. This is a host of great theologians and philosophers came one after another. It's like a little different from this is another theory, which is not very much popular or maybe not so much studied, because in a way it is close to the reflection theory called Abhasavada. So, for example, if you bring, let's say, a red flower close to a crystal, a shining crystal, you find for some time the crystal appears to have become red in color, but that is only due to just proximity. In a way, it is very close to reflection theory. The other theory is called Avachedavada. The space within the pot is Ghadakasha, Akasha space, which appears to be confined or limited, restricted by the shape and size of the pot, and the space outside, so Mahakasha. So if you break the pot, what happens? The space which appears to be not real, but appears to be limited by this pot, the shape of the pot, the size of the pot, it merges with the space outside, Mahakasha. So in like that, when we interpret ourselves after excluding our body mind complex phenomenon, or our mind, intellect, memory, and ecosystem, if we exclude that, then what we are is this Brahman itself. That's Aham Brahmasmi. In fact, the idea of Abhasavada is linked to one more Brahma Sutra, it's called Abhasa Eva, which we discussed earlier. And another important point before actually coming to the text, and this is also very important. Aham Brahmasmi literally means I am Brahman. Now, one may ask this question: if I am Brahman, why should we make a statement about it? See, we don't need to make a statement which is a fact, which is a matter of experience. We never make a statement about something that is obvious. For example, I don't say I have a head, I don't say I have two hands. It's obvious. So the very fact that we make a statement, this can be an objection from Purvapakshins. The very fact that we make a statement leaves some room for doubt and speculation and different doctrines and different theories. So Vedantins will tell you that Aham Brahmasmi, the Mahavakya, the statement or the text, the book, this great idea, it is not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to go beyond the Mahavakya statement, but reach the Mahavakya experience. This is an important thing to remember. Because when you use the word Aham Brahmasmi, there is this distinction between the knower, the known, and the process of knowing or knowledge. That is Pramata, Prameya, and Pramana. So Shankaracharya, towards the end of his Sadhusutri Bhashya, will tell you the subject, object, and knowledge. The knower, the non-object, and the process of knowledge. This distinction disappears when you actually reach experience. So one striking example could be found in the life of Swami Tattwamayananda, who was a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. Actually, he was in San Francisco. He came to San Francisco in 1900s, and he is the founder of the first Hindu monastery in the West. The first Hindu institution, something similar to a temple or a place for meditation, was built by the Swami Tattwamayananda, who was an established Advaiti and non-dualist, and he built a monastery in San Antonio Valley, about 90 miles away from San Francisco. And after staying for 2 years, he left for India. And then he lived in Benares, immersed in study of Vedanta, books like this. And at the time of death, he made a statement. And with this statement, he passed away. And when he was staying in this first Hindu monastery, it's called Shanti Ashrama, San Antonio Valley, he was engaged in teaching texts like Vivekachudamani and other Bhagavad Gita and all. He was a staunch non-dualist. So just before he breathed his last, he made a statement, Brahma Satyam, Jagat Satyam. Now, this may appear to be totally opposite, diametrically opposite to the well-known statement in Vedanta, Brahma Satyam, Jagat Mithya. Now remember, Brahma Satyam, Jagat Mithya, that statement is a penultimate state, not the ultimate. In fact, even the most important non-dualistic statement also belongs to dualism. That's an important thing. Vedanta will tell you, all the Vedantic books, all the Advaitic texts that we discuss are within Dvaita, within the level of dualism. The great spiritual experience, the great inner experience of oneness that we are going to discuss today in this text, that experience alone transcends duality. So that's why in the Brahma Sutra you find Anishta Vyatma Vijnanat Prag Pramatrutam Atmanaham Anishta Syat Pramataiva Papma Doshadi Varjita. So once you experience, you attain what you are investigating into, what you are inquiring into, once you really become an experiencer, at that moment, knower, knowledge, known, these subject, object, and the relationship between the two, the process of knowing, these distinctions, pramada, prameya, and pramana, all they disappear. And that is papa doshadi varjitaha. That is pramada itself. I mean, when we inquire into the nature of reality, and when we reach the experience level, or when we actually experience it, then what we realize is that the ultimate reality we are inquiring into is ourself, non-distinct from ourself, that pure reality. That's why Deharma Pratyo Yadut Pramanattvena Kalpidaha Laukikam Tattadevedam Pramanatva Atmanishchayat. The same idea, the Pramana, Prameya, Pramada. All these disappear when you reach the experience level. So this philosophy, that is when we practice spiritual practices, when you do spiritual disciplines, all these will continue only till we actually reach the experience level. So Aham Brahmasmi, the word, the statement itself, in a way, it is only a pointer, a road that takes us to the ultimate experience, which is beyond the statement itself. Now, I'm going to discuss this in the light of the original text in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So I already just read the text. The most important text where the Mahavakya itself appears is the 10th mantra of the 4th Brahmana of the 1st chapter. It is Brahmava idam agra asit tadatmanam eva aved aham brahmasmi idi tasmat sarvam abhavat tad yo devanam ribuddhide, etc. So actually, Brahmava idam agra asit tadatmanam eva aved aham brahmasmi idi. This is the most important statement. What it implies is this. The implication is simple. This Atman, this Brahman, or this Atma itself was indeed Brahman in the very beginning. I knew only itself. And how did I express that knowledge? Aham Brahmasmi idi, I am Brahman. This is a literal statement. Now, this actually leads to very long discussions. And many of these discussions actually appear in Shankaracharya's commentary on the 7th mantra. In some ways, it continues in the 8th and 9th mantra. Finally, it culminates in the Bhashya and the commentary of the 10th mantra. Now, here, there are some doubts and some questions that could be raised by some other philosophers. For example, of course, that's not within our scope. There were some great philosophers in ancient times. One is Upavarsha. Sometimes he's identified with Bodhayana, Vritti. So Upavarsha is known among Vedanta. He's a Vrittikara, and his view or doctrine is known as Vrittikara Matam. And according to him, this Atman, I mean, he realizes as the I consciousness. But because his works are not, I mean, the whole of his text is not yet known, because not yet found out. And we come to know of his doctrines and his philosophical ideas mostly from the books, mostly from the commentaries of Shankaracharya, and also from the Vartiga, from the Bhashya Vartigam, the super commentary written on Shankaracharya's commentary on Brihadaranyaka Upanishad by the great Sureshwaracharya, who wrote a very, very important Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, Bhashya Vartigam. And another scholar who also dealt with some of these subjects was his name is Bhartu Prapancha. His views are referred to in the Gita Bhashyam and elsewhere, but in Brihadaranyaka Bhashya Vartigam, Sureshwaracharya discusses this elaborately. So according to him, there is no such thing as transcending karma. When you get an experience of transcending everything, going beyond all rituals, total identification with the entire existence, that is sarvabhavapatti, that's a term used here, which we'll discuss in course of time. So aham brahmasmi, the anubhuti comes, the experience comes, and simultaneously also realize that sarvam khalu idam brahma, everything is Brahman. So this total identification with the whole existence, once this is reached, you transcend all karmas, all rituals, all the disciplines. I mean, you don't have to do anything more. This is the standard, the traditional Vedantic view. In opposition to this, of course, Bhattu Prabhanja lived before Shankaracharya. So Bhattu Prabhanja used to preach that it's not like that. Even after realizing the supreme truth intellectually as a doctrine, you have to practice rituals and all these paraphernalia or daily rituals, because there is no such thing as transcending all karma. So jnana karma samuccayavada, the doctrine of harmony between rituals and supreme knowledge, which is what Shankaracharya refuted. He didn't reject it, but he refuted, saying that the highest experience transcends all need for any kind of rituals and external practices. You can certainly perform rituals, but you are not bound by the need to perform rituals when you get the supreme spiritual identification with the whole existence. It's actually a doctrinal matter, which I just pointed out. Now, coming to the subject. Now, here one problem arises now. According to Vedantins, and this should be kept in mind, according to Vedantins, if you are fully qualified spiritually, if you're fully qualified, your mind is ready, you practice all your life meditation, a strong urge for spiritual realization, and you totally renounce all worldly desires, and you practice this single-minded, dedicated spiritual discipline, meditating on Brahman. And so you are fully qualified. Your mind is fully fit for the highest spiritual knowledge. I'll give an example. Suppose you get a first rank in your 5th grade examination. And many of the most brilliant students who get first grade, let's say rank holder, maybe he may be the most brilliant student in the whole country. And he has now passed, he's now ready and is fit to enter the 6th grade. Now, a teacher comes on the day 1, a teacher who's teaching the lessons for the 6th grade students, and begins a lesson, the first lesson. Immediately, this student, the brilliant student who got first place, immediately he will understand. He doesn't have to work very hard to understand what the teacher is teaching, because he's so fully established, he's so well mastered all the lessons that are prescribed for his 5th grade, from who here he studied very well. Now he will immediately, if the 6th grade student, day 1, if he takes the early lessons, immediately he will understand. Like that, if a spiritual seeker is fully ready for learning, for the highest Advaitic knowledge, if he just happens to get instruction from a teacher, from a qualified teacher, once, immediately that Sravanam, it's called Sravanam, that listening, the statement, immediately will have an impact on him. Just as the brilliant student who has gone into 6th grade class, he will immediately understand what the teacher is teaching on day 1. So A person who is fully established in sadhana chatushtaya sampatti, nitya nitya vastu vivekaham, ihamutra phalabhoga virakaham, samadhi sakka sampatti mumukshuttum. That is a strong sense of discerning wisdom between what is real and what is unreal, and clinging fast to what is real, disregarding, giving up all that is unreal, and a sense of renunciation for all of all worldly desires, and naturally all the the blessings of that kind of sense of renunciation, self-restraint, self-control, all the samadhi, sarkasam, and then sarkasambhati and mumukshutvam. And he doesn't care for anything other than spiritual enlightenment. Such a person, if he listens to Tattwamasi Mahavakya, immediately Aham Brahmasmi experience will strike in his mind, because his mind is fully ready for it. And of course, he has also practiced Sravana, Manana, Nidhyasana, and so like that. It is called Shabda Parokshvada, which we referred to earlier. There is another school called Prasankhyanavada, but doesn't agree with this. This Shabda Parokshvada was a view held by Pratmapada, Prakashatmayadi, and Vidyaranya and others. And the opposite view is held by Vajaspati Misra, who wrote the Bhamati Tika. So his school is known as Bhamati school. He says no. Even the most brilliant student who had got first rank in all examinations, the 5th grade, and if he listens to the elementary lesson, the first lesson, the 6th class, he won't understand it. It's totally logical. It is not logical. Totally illogical. It's important thing. Suppose you're driving from San Francisco to Sacramento every day, 31 days, 30 days of the week. And if I tell you there is a place on the way, you will immediately relate it in your mind. It's a simple thing, because every day you walk, you're traveling. That's like getting sadhana chatushtaya sampatti. Now, this is the standard Advaitin's view. Shankaracharya's commentaries have enough scope to accommodate both these views. Those who are not fully established in sadhana chatushtaya sampatti, they need to read every day. They have to get up in the morning, read this, do mananam. Then slowly this conviction, intellectual conviction, called Siddhanta Jnanam, intellectual conviction becomes matter of inner experience. This is an important thing. So, but every day you have to practice this, called Sravana Bhakti, means every day you have to go on listening to these 3 statements. And one day, the experience dimension of the statement will immediately will dawn in our mind. So, this is an important thing to remember. But remember, now we are entering a discussion. There are people who will tell you that, no, it is impossible for this kind of immediate experience. Not only that, this statement has got another aspect. Now we have to remember I'm going to another important subject. This Aham Brahmasmi Mahavakya comes in the 10th mantra. I remember in the previous session, somebody raised a question with regard to the meaning of the 10th mantra. I'm very happy they asked this question, because unless this question is shoot, I won't get an opportunity to explain. It's a very intricate subject. This is slightly boring, but it is good to be mentally exhausted reading some high philosophy than loading our mind with unnecessary ideas. So now, in the first chapter, there is one Upanishad mantra that we have to keep in mind. The mantra is this: Atma itteva upasida. This is an important mantra. It first appears in this context. It appears in the 7th mantra of the same text. Aham Brahmasmi Mahavakya comes in the 10th mantra. What I am now referring to, it comes in the 7th mantra. The literal meaning of the mantra in English, we can say, Atman alone is to be meditated upon, or the self alone, or Atman alone is to be meditated upon. This is the literal meaning of this mantra. So actually, Aham Brahmasmi, that context can be understood only on the basis of this. So this mantra comes in, this particular statement comes in the 7th mantra of the 4th Brahmanam of the 1st chapter of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. The mantra is this: Ekaigena bhavati atma iti eva upasida atra hi ede sarva ekam bhavanti. This is the meaning. That is the simple point to keep in mind. Atman alone is the one absolute reality. All the plurality, diversity are nothing but manifestations of name and form. Behind and beyond all these diversities and pluralities created by names and forms, there is one supreme truth, that is Atma. This is the most important, one of the most important statement in the entire Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Atma iti eva upasita. This Atman, or the self alone, is to be meditated upon. So, every example is only an approximation. Example can never be equal to what the example is trying to explain. Suppose you are looking at a piece of cloth. Maybe you are looking at, say, 10,000 different varieties of cloth made out of the same cotton, the same thread. Or you are looking at 10,000 different ornaments made of the same gold. And but you can understand the nature of gold, then you'll understand the nature, the fundamental nature, the unchanging nature of all these different manifestations of the same metal. Like that, we have to meditate on Atman, which is the connecting link with the one reality, which is the only absolute reality, and all manifestations of diversities and pluralities are manifestations of Nama and Rupa. Acharambhanam vikaro namadheyam muttigayateva satyam. In the Chandogya Upanishad, we already discussed while discussing Tattwamasi. Everything depends upon this name and form. All these all the mud pots, mud jars, mud glasses are different manifestations, different changing manifestations of the same clay or mud. Now, here you have to remember, so you can put this self, Atman alone, is to be meditated upon. Now, some other philosophers, they come with some objection. What is the objection? They say, this is actually an instruction to perform a ritual. An important thing. This is nothing but an instruction to perform a ritual. For example, the traditional example is this Deshapurnamasaabhyam Sargakamo Ijeda Ityevamadu. Bhashyakara says elsewhere. Deshapurnamasa. Deshapurnamasa is some kind of a fire ritual. In early Vedic times, all the householders used to practice this Deshapurnamasi, performed every fortnight on new moon and full moon days. It's a kind of fire sacrifice. It is to be performed twice a month. Those who want to go to Surga, Surga means heaven. So the heaven mentioned here is not a very elevated, not a divine status or anything. It is a place where you will have all good things of this world, but you will live a very disciplined life. You will be ascetic, you will follow dharma. But the whole purpose of human life is to enjoy long life, plenty of money, wealth, status, reputation, all these things. That's the attraction of Surga in this context. It is not should not be equated with heaven as understood in Christian mystical tradition, because in Christian theology, heaven has got a spiritual connection. It's the place where God lives. You will be in close proximity with the presence of God. But that divinity element, the spiritual element, is not implied in the concept of heaven according to the philosophers of ritualists, means Mimamsa, Purva Mimamsa philosophy. Now, so these Mimamsakas, the ritualist philosopher, will tell you it is actually an injunction for performing certain rituals. And they give the example. In this, for example, Yatra Vidivaki Sravana Matra Janita Vijnana Vitiragena Purusha Prabhuti Gamyade Das Desapurnamasa Abhyam Surgakamu Vijeda Ityeva Madhu. This is the Bhasha I'm reading, I'm reciting. So, you know, in the Vedic literature, there are many injunctions. I must pause for a minute, you know. To explain these ancient things, it's not a very easy task. I'm bringing this. Vedanta is relatively easy to explain. Philosophy is easy. But ancient Vedic rituals, their intricacies and implications, it's not very easy to explain. So there could be some gap between what I mean and what you understand. And you are most welcome to come forward with any question at the end of the session. That's the only comfort. So in ancient times, these Vedic philosophers used to practice many kinds of Vedic rituals. And the rules and regulations and injunctions of these rituals were found in the Sauda Suttas, mentioned in Jaimini's Purva Mimamsa Sutras, and so on. Primarily, there used to be three types of vidhis. This injunction, this injunction for performing a Vedic ritual is called in Sanskrit vidhi. Vidhivakyane means statements which include an injunction for the performance of Vedic rituals. So, the apurva vidhi, that means one kind of injunction, which actually an injunction, the purpose is, I mean, to perform a ritual, and that injunction is totally unknown through any other means. I mean, this particular statement alone will tell you what you should do if you want to attain, for example, in this context, heaven, Surgakamo Vijeda, or Desapurnamasabhyam Surgakamo Vijeda. Those who want to go to Surga, heaven, they should practice Desapurnamasya. These rituals every 15 days, once every 15 days, twice a month. They should do that. Now, how to go to Surga? You get this knowledge only from this injunction. There is no other way. Such an injunction is called Apurva Vidhi in Sanskrit. Called Apurva means something that did not exist before, not found elsewhere. So if you want to go to heaven, this old Vedic text will tell you, you should perform certain rituals. Another kind of injunction is called Niyama Vidhi. So in what are the special rules and regulations the details for performing a specific ritual. It's called Niyamavidhi. And then there is another injunction which actually implies exclusion of any other method. This should be done only in this particular manner. 3 types of injunctions. This is only not for very important, but for your understanding only. So the Purvamimamsakas will tell you this particular statement. Those who want to experience this Aham Brahmasmi, the highest spiritual experience, total identification with the whole existence, the same divine principle is within me. I am that divine principle, not in this embodied being, but within me, the divine principle, the Atman, that is present everywhere, that is present in everything. So therefore, I am one with the entire existence. This is the real meaning of this particular statement. But the Mimamsakas, the ritualists will tell you, no, you have to perform a particular kind of meditation. And as a result of this meditation, you will get this Aham Brahmasmi Anubhuti. Shankaracharya says no. Because if you get an experience as a result of certain rituals and practices, that experience can never be eternal. It's an important thing. Anything that is a result of a set of activities, it cannot be eternal. Because before you undertook those activities, it did not exist. So the Advaitins will tell you, even if you are fully convinced you are only this body as nothing else, still you are Brahman. So the fact that you are Brahman is not the result of any kind of ritualistic practices, any kind of knowledge. What happens to you is the wrong notion that you entertained, that you are not Brahman, that you are this body-mind complex. That wrong notion disappears. And disappearance of that wrong notion is the only purpose of meditation, like the I am Atman, that meditation. So I am Atman, that is not an injunction for meditation. Atma ityevam vasida. It is not an injunction, not a call for performing a set of rituals, but rather it is only an attempt to remove the wrong notion that we have in our mind, that we are this body-mind complex. The wrong notion that we have in our mind that we are not Brahman, the wrong notion that we are only this body-mind complex. In other words, you are bringing the light to the room, the semi-dark room, not to produce a rope, but to remove from your head the wrong notion that it is not a rope, but it's a snake. That means all rituals, all books are only an attempt to remove the wrong notion that we have in our mind, because the right notion exists independent of books. You can imagine, for those of you who are interested in comparative philosophy or comparative theology, you can imagine God reveals you one truth. Before that, you didn't know anything. So because somebody told you, you understand this. That knowledge can never be eternal. What is yours can be only what is you are born with. You may have wrong notion. See, we may have the wrong notion that is a snake. But the fact that we found out that it is not a snake, the reason for that discovery is the fact that it was not a snake to begin with, it was only a rope. Similarly, we realize Brahman not because we need to realize Brahman, but rather because we were Brahman even when we did not realize it. So that means liberation is not a gift from God. Liberation, Swami Vivekananda in English language is liberation of birthright. Spirituality is a birthright. You can find these powerful statements in Vivekananda. In English, they sound very profound, very high sounding, but these are all based on these texts. So my purpose is to somehow, to connect our understanding of Vedanta to the original source, from where it is coming. All the way from the Mount Everest is coming, and we often think this Ganga, the river Ganga, started a few miles away, but it started on the way Gomukh, thousands of feet above the sea level. So you can find here. So Atma Ityeva Upasida. So you can imagine the ritualist will tell you, no, it means you have to practice every day. You have to get up in the morning. I am Atman. You have to practice. Like business management people, every day they have to get up in the morning and I will succeed. I will succeed. I'm okay. I'm happy. That makes you that kind of state. It's not like that. Rather, even if you think you're unhappy, you're actually happy. Even if you think that you are body-mind complex, even if you think you are a piece of stone, you are not going to be a piece of stone. You are Brahman. It's whether you realize it today or maybe after 1 million life cycles. It's a matter of time only. That's Vedanta, I tell you. So what is essentially yours alone can be your property, not something that is given to you. What is given to you cannot be yours eternally, because before you received it, it was not yours. And if you receive from somebody, somebody can take it away from you. Our liberation, our spiritual nature cannot be taken away from us. That's why it is eternal. This is the Vedantic perspective. So you can imagine many of the philosophies called, in your English translation, you find prima facie view. I mean, that's actually, it should not be understood in the same sense in which the original Latin expression is found. Here, prima facie view means not the first reading. What it means is a different view. It is projected to emphasize the Vedanta philosophy. So this many of the ritualist philosophers will tell you that Atma Ityeva Upasida is only an injunction. Every day you should meditate. I am Atman. Atman is the essence of everything. Atman is everything. This way you should meditate. Vedanta will tell you, no, it is not an injunction for performing a ritual. Rather, it is something that you should meditate to remove from your mind the wrong notion that you are not Atman. That's important. In other words, our true Atman, our true nature is eternally ours, even before we realize it. We realize it as a part of, as a result of our spiritual disciplines. Just because you remove the dust from the surface of the mirror, and then you find the mirror reflects light. So actually, the piece of cloth with which you remove the dust did not create light. The piece of cloth only removed the thin layer of dust on the mirror. So when the dust was wiped off, the light was reflected. This is an important thing to remember. This is Purnamasa, those who read the original book, it's only one of the Srauda yajnas. So there are two types of Srauda yajna. One is Sapta Havir yajna, Sapta Soma yajna. This is one of the Sapta Havir yajnas. So this is an important point. Remember. Now I shall just read some very, very powerful statements from Shankaracharya's own words. This week, it will be it's important to remember these ancient words of wisdom. Now, how Shankaracharya emphasizes the point that there is no injunction involved. Atma Ityeva Upasida. We should meditate on Atman alone. It is not a call, not an injunction for performing certain rituals. This meditation is not a ritual as a result of which you get Aham Brahmasmi experience. Rather, this meditation is only an effort to remove the obstacles that stand in the way of our wrong notion that we are not Brahman. So Shankaracharya says, Narthandra Bhavat, Nacha Atma Ityeva Upasida Idi Apurva Vidhi. He says it is not an Apurva Vidhi. It is not a Vedic injunction for performance of rituals. Kasmat Atma Surupa Atma Surupa Khatana Anatma Pradesheda Vakya Janita Vijnana Vitiregena Arthantrasya Kartavyasya Manasasya Bahisyava Abhava Tatrahi Videhi Saphalyam. It's a very long Sanskrit sentence, but it's better to to hear this. I shall read the statement again. Atma Surupa Kathana Anatma Pradesheda Vakya Janita Vijnana Vitirekena Arthantarasya Kartavyasya Manasasya Bahisyava Abhava Tatrahi Videhi Saphalyam. You know what it means? Now, normally, suppose let us hope you should meditate like this. Let us say you should go to market, take this money or credit card, buy certain things. Suppose a statement comes. So what does it mean? Immediately you should open your wallet, put the credit card, take your car, go to the market, purchase things. Suppose somebody tells you, go and buy. I'm trying to bring it to our own 21st century American context. Suppose you get a request or an injunction or some kind of a call from your supervisor, let's say, go and buy, let's say, a packet of cookies for nearby market. The statements like ends there. Then what does it mean? You cannot just hear the statement and remain there. The statement prompts you towards an action. Manasasya Bahisya, either an internal action or an external action. Internal action means you have to know where the market is located. External action means you have to take out the car, go and buy it. So this action is implied when there is an injunction. So that's an important thing. Whenever a ritual is implied, it's not the statement alone. It should be followed by certain activity, because it prompts you to do certain things, physically or mentally. Manasasya Bahyasya Abha. But in this context, there is no such activity involved. You know, there is no such activity involved. Why? That reason is here. Atma Ityeva Upasida. The Atman alone is to be meditated upon. This statement is not an injunction. It doesn't prompt you to do anything. It doesn't prompt you to any activity. Now, Shankaracharya says, that he says, Yatra, this is an important statement. Okay, I shall try to read it. Yatra vidhi vakya sravana matra janita vijnana vitiregena purusha pravrittihi gamyade yada dashapurnamasabyam surgakamo yajeda ityavamadu nahi dashapurnamasa vidhi vakya janita vijnanameva dashapurnamasa anushtanam tacha adhigaradya apeksha anubhavi. What it means is, in this context, you are fully qualified. Your mind is ready with the spiritual tendencies. You are fully established in sadhana, sadhushtaya sampatti, practicing renunciation, practicing self-control, practicing pure life. Whole mind is fully involved in meditation. So at that time, you listen to this statement. The Atman alone is to be meditated upon. Immediately, you know, your mind will go to Atman. Your mind automatically goes to Atman. Or at that time, when you listen to Tattwamasi Mahavakya, immediately the Mahavakya will create Aham Brahmasmi experience. It doesn't prompt you into any action, rather it creates in your mind this inexplicable experience of identification and oneness with the whole creation. That spiritual experience is called the experience of non-dualism. It comes uninvited. It's a natural experience that a person gets in spiritual life, a mystical experience. It cannot be expressed in words. Every other experience can be expressed in words. But spiritual experience of oneness of the entire existence and one's own identification with that experience can never be explained. And Shankaracharya says, all the words, all the Vedas, all the mystical books are only failed attempts to explain what is beyond explanation. Remember, this is far beyond the reach of monotheism. Monotheism ends with anthropomorphism. You think of a very compassionate, very kind-hearted, very powerful, very good, very noble God. That is absolutely wonderful. Nothing wrong. That's very wonderful. But Vedanta goes even beyond that. Vedanta takes you towards your own identification with the whole existence. And you can find an approximation of this idea you can find in Meister Eckhart. I have given many talks on this subject, Meister Eckhart and Shankaracharya, and also in my Mandukya Karya class and elsewhere, I have compared Meister Eckhart's negative theology, where he says that, to define God in terms of Holy Trinity itself is a blasphemy, in the sense that it is only an attempt. It is not the complete picture, because the absolute reality is an experiential truth. It can only be experienced. It can never be explained. Therefore, when a spiritual seeker is fully established in all spiritual qualifications that make him fit for the highest spiritual experience, even when he hears it, immediately becomes an experience. Sri Ramakrishna's life is one example. He was practicing spirituality, meditation, right from his birth. He did not know it. For him, the difficulty was to think of anything other than God. So, the fact that this world is only a relativity, is not eternal. It was an ingrained fact of experience in him. So when he listened to the Mahavakya, immediately he struck in his mind as a fact of experience. So now we can have interaction. You are most welcome to ask questions. Only there are many points that may appear to be obscure, but you are most welcome to ask questions and we can have an active discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you very much. Sri Ram, you're first in the queue.
If we accept that our nature or our natural nature is we are Brahman, then inference of any activity that is suggested in the scripture, if we interpret it as something that will remove the ignorance of our true nature, then that would not appear to contradict mokshasya akaryatvat. Is that correct, Swami?
Oh yeah. Mokshasya akaryatvad. Mokshasya akaryatvad is what I was trying to expound. What is the meaning of mokshasya akaryatvad? Moksha, or this spiritual experience that we have discussed till now, it is not the result of any activity. It is not the effect of any cause. That's the meaning of mokshasya akaryatvad. So when you find akaryatvad, means actually that's a standard language of the Bhashya. Spiritual liberation, if it is a result of any activity, then that state of enlightenment cannot be eternal. So remember, the surface of the mirror is by its very nature pure. It can reflect sunlight. So a lot of dust gathered on the surface of the mirror. You remove the dust and the sunlight returns. It could reflect the sunlight because it had inherently the faculty to reflect sunlight. The faculty, its ability to reflect sunlight, it did not receive from the cloth with which you cleaned the surface of the mirror. So already there. You only remove the dust. Like that in Vedanta, all scriptural readings, all spiritual disciplines help you to slowly remove the surface. And one important difficulty in understanding this is, when we evolve, when we go through different life cycles, we are ascending towards a higher and higher level of getting a clean mirror. So every life cycle, a little bit of dust is wiped off, removed, and slowly the sunlight reflects on the karana more and more brilliantly. So, how do we feel it? Even the natural inclination to listen to Vedanta is a real proof that you have already a clean mirror behind the layer of dust. I tell you, this kind of Vedantic dialect is, you won't be able to, unless you, of course, you become a professor for teaching this, you may learn all this for a job, as part of a job. But a natural interest in higher Vedanta, an urge for understanding some higher transcendental spiritual idea, which is not part of any established monotheistic religion, Hindu, Buddhist, or any. That itself is a natural proof. That's a proof that inherently you are liberated. That's why, in the Mandukya Karika, actually, na nirodho na chotpatti, na bandho na sadhaka, na mumukshu na vai muktaha, ittesha paramartha. You know what it means? There is no bondage, there is no liberation, there is no spiritual seeker, and there is no spiritual discipline. There is nothing, because they are essentially Brahman. This is the highest experience. Now remember, the problem in modern times, this should not be read out of its context. This is the state of the highest spiritual truth. And this experience can be claimed by somebody. As a fact, it can be claimed only somebody who has gone beyond all this. But for Vedanta students, this idea is very powerful, very inspiring, because right now we may be at the level of duality, but it doesn't matter. Slowly, if we can fill our mind with more and more of these higher spiritual ideas, you find you will be taking an ascent in our own spiritual evolution. Difficult. I know what I said just now. If you read Eckhart, Master Eckhart, he was buried. His teachings were obscured deliberately. The man himself disappeared. No, but he got a new life only when Rudolf Otto popularized his teachings by translating his books and interpreting his teachings. You can imagine, in the 13th century, he lived in Germany. There was nothing heard about him later on for many centuries. Only Rudolf Otto, just recently, more than a century ago, he gave him a new life. That's how the great Christian Advaitin got a new life, new lease of life. So even Advaita is heavily criticized. Aham Brahmasmi. So it looks very laughable, so childish, unless you understand the context. What it means is the same divine principle that is present in all of us, not this body mind complex, that is present in everyone. That's what it says. And
can I not infer
so
the
statement comes again and again in these commentaries. I'm going to read a few more important statements from the commentaries. Thank you.
I could also interpret this bi-weekly, fortnightly yajna as something that will remove the dust on the mirror. So can I not interpret it in that sense?
Yeah, true. Yajnas are normally performed by people who have a strong, definite desire for a specific purpose. They perform it. But those who perform these rituals without any desire, for them, every ritual will take them 1 inch forward, because it purifies our mind. So you may practice, if there are priests, for example, there are some evolved priests who are Ritvaks, who practice this, who are part of the yajnas and yagas. They perform this, and they do elaborately, they utter the mantra, but they are not very much attached. They don't have any desire. So any kind of practice, the karma yoga, laugika karma, vaidika karma, Vedic rituals, or even ordinary empirical activities, if done without selfish desire, that will be purifying. That will purify your mind, like taking a piece of cloth and removing the dust.
And this is one of the mantras we say, Brahma Teja. When we take on the Yajna we say Brahma Teja Abhivrudhyartham. To improve my, when we take on the Yajna we say Brahma Teja Abhivrudhyartham, the mantra. That is to enhance the enhance the radiance, to remove the dust.
Your question will be understood only in a specific cultural context. So I shall explain. Yajna actually means sacred thread which is given to a Vedic student at the time of Upanayana, means initiation into Vedic studies. So you should transcend it. You should not throw away. Rituals should drop you. Rituals should leave you. You should not leave rituals. You should transcend rituals. You should not reject rituals. It's an important thing. So Sri Ramakrishna, if you read Sri Ramakrishna's very striking example. When he came to the Dakshineshwar, he was very meticulous about the performance of puja, worship, all this, plucking flowers, performing rituals, mantras. He was very, very specific. Absolutely. Very careful. And then slowly, when his devotion took a transcendental turn, then he became less specific about the details of rituals. Rather, he started looking upon the Divine Mother as a living spiritual principle. So then, and he looked upon the image as his own loving mother. So when you see, when you perform ritual very mechanically, giving attention to every specific detail, it implies a remoteness, a distance between you and Divine Mother. But suppose you don't care for the specific details, rather of the rituals, rather you look upon the images of a Divine Mother herself, then you actually start doing puja with great devotion, because you come closer as the reality of the Mother's presence become more and more striking, more and more real to you. It intensifies. Then you become less and less specific and less rigid with regard to rituals. Remember, any person who is extremely fanatic about rituals, that person may have a very impure mind. It's an important thing. There's an interesting thing. If a person gives too much fanatical, you can imagine certain religious traditions when they give, their God is on their side. And they have an agreement. Everything is okay. My God is my friend. I'm on his side. He's on my side. I can do whatever I want. So long as I perform certain rituals, my God is happy with me. Then I can hate the whole humanity because my God is on my side. So then you become very, very fanatical in the performance of ritual. Actually, there is much less spirituality in that kind of mechanical practices. When you become more and more spiritual, you pay less and less importance to the mechanical details of rituals, because your mind becomes more and more evolved. It moves closer and closer to the reality of God. Okay, thank you. Anybody, any other questions?
Yes, Maharaj. Sanjay is next.
Pranam Maharaj. This was a wonderful lecture. My question, I'll first present my confusion and I would like to get your comments on it. you today, there are two parts that is confusing me. One is not confusing. You clarified a lot in the previous answer. One is the meditation upon Tattwamasi, right? That itself will get us close to realizing Aham Brahmasmi. That's one part. I interpret that as the best way for liberation is to just meditate upon it. That's one thing. The second part is you mentioned that what you achieve through ritual.
Atma Ityeva Vasi that you mentioned, is it?
Yes, yeah, the meditating upon the Atma. Yes.
Yeah, I tell you, I know I have to correct this. I will stop now and correct this because
Sure.
this can lead to misunderstanding.
Okay.
Now, Atma Ityeva Vasida
Mm.
is a specific theme discussed in the first chapter of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, especially in the context of Aham Brahmasmi experience. And the whole commentary from 7th mantra, 8th mantra, 9th mantra, it builds up, finally it culminates in the 10th mantra, where Aham Brahmasmi is expounded at the highest, as the result of the highest experience that is stated as Aham Brahmasmi. And what led to this experience? Meditation on Atma Ityeva Vasida. It is in the specific context of this first chapter of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Remember. So actually, this is a very huge Upanishad. And it's a great adventure to put this in a few lectures.
Yes.
In fact, Brahmasmi, I told you beginning, Aham Brahmasmi is a very elaborate rituals. Remember, elaborate subject. And frequently people study 1 year to finish this first chapter itself. Every day if you hold classes, 2 classes every year. Because this particular chapter is studied with Bhashya by Shankaracharya and Sureshwaracharya's Vartika on this Bhashya, fairly big. So you should be sufficiently patient and I mean, it is, remember, it is studied only by those who consider the study itself as spiritual enlightenment.
Yes.
Study itself in the morning without study. So remember, it's a very interesting thing how, I remember the best of these traditions are still being preserved in the Himalayan, especially among the great monks. For them, 50 years they study, 40 years they study. So how many PhDs you can imagine? I'm memorizing everything. So actually, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad mantra, Shankaracharya Bhashya, then Sureshwaracharya Bhashya Vartika, and remember. And so practically, and you have to go on explaining each statement. So it itself is a fulfillment. I give this example. I can only compare this, a rough comparison I can, long ago in 1980s, early 80s, I took a few Ramakrishna Mission monks to a synagogue in Kerala. It's one of the earliest synagogues. It goes back to 51 or 52 AD. And there was still some rabbis, Spanish, old people, and they were still reading this book. Now, one may ask this question, why are you reading this? For them, there is no why or how. It is service life. There is no higher fulfillment. That kind of attitude alone could have preserved these traditions. I mean, reading, thinking, and teaching, not writing books. Many of the greatest scholars have not written any books, They learn and they teach, nothing else. So I can only give a rough example because in the Western context, to give a rough idea of what this actually means in real life, so I gave this example. So you go on reading, and reading itself, they don't ask the question, why am I reading this? Write a book, an article, and we'll keep it. Nothing of the kind. That itself is a fulfillment. That attitude alone would have preserved these branches, not the professors in the university. Gotcha. None of them can be compared to the great teachers who lived the Himalayan ashramas. Some of them, many other places, because the professors and pandits, you cannot blame them because they're burdened with the responsibility of taking care of families. They have to teach. So they have to follow certain routine. When you follow routine, it's a limitation. But you consider this a life, there's no limitation. You identify yourself with this statement. That is that you have to understand these words, these canonical traditions were preserved by people who considered learning, studying, and listening itself as the highest fulfillment. But they never asked the question, what am I going to learn by this? No, nothing. That is there's a transcendental approach to Holy Scriptures. That approach alone could preserve a great tradition. And that's the essence of the Guru Parampara tradition that we discussed in yesterday's class. I didn't get enough time just to finish in 15 minutes. So it's an important yesterday's lecture.
So Maharaj, I look at two paths. One is the Atma, the thinking about the Atman that you just described. Now the second part is on the ritual. Now it appears that the first part is the right approach. It appears to me. But then you said what you can achieve through, realize through ritual, it will never be everlasting. But it kind of makes me think that this ritualistic part is much easier than the first part. And the second, I will go back to what Sri Ram asked, is when we do the rituals, right, it has cleared a lot of dust. It has got us to closer to acharyas like you for us. That's my experience. With all the things, I feel blessed that I'm able to connect with you. So, and I believe that that path has opened up through because of all the japas I've done, all the homas I've sought along with Sri Ram in so many temples. So that's one part. So I want your comments on the ritual path. And if you can touch upon what is the ritualistic path, although it is not everlasting, what can you touch upon the ritual path of realizing that? That's my comment.
You know, we don't give up rituals. We only transcend rituals.
Yes.
We never give up rituals. Those who, Sri Ram was making a statement. It's quite funny. He breaks, throw away his Yajnopavita. Suppose, you get, coconut trees. There'll be a scar, and each scar represents a place from where the leaves have fallen. So that in a way indicates the growth and maturity of the tree. But suppose you take a chopper and cuts off all the leaves, coconut tree doesn't grow. So each scar represents a spot from which these leaves are fallen. In a way, they also indicate the age and maturity, the height of the coconut tree. But one day, if you take a chopper and remove all of them, you don't get a big coconut tree. It dies. So we never give up rituals. Rituals give us up. Rituals leave us. We don't leave rituals. So Sri Ramakrishna was plucking flowers during the first few years of his spiritual sadhana in Dakshineshwar. And finally, one day he found he cannot pluck flowers, Villua leaves, because that's also Brahman. And he stopped doing puja from then onwards. So Sri Ramakrishna transcended. He did not give up. So when you go from 5th grade to 6th grade, you don't give up what you learned in 5th grade. You transcend, you go beyond what you learned in 5th grade. That is one important answer. Second point I want to mention, Atma Itteva Upasida. This is very important because I was thinking of skipping this portion and focus on the 10th mantra only. But then, and I'm happy that Mark Goodrich last time, he raised a question which actually prompted me to refer to the 9th mantra. Because the 10th mantra is a culmination of a philosophical discussion building up in the earlier mantras. If you go to the bhasha, it's very elaborate bhasha, each context. So when one of our eager students raised a question, I thought maybe I would do an injustice if I don't refer to the previous mantras. That's why the last session, at the end of the class, I mentioned to you the 10th mantra is in a way an answer of a discussion that is building up in the previous mantras. And we have not yet done, we will continue this discussion in the next session. So I mentioned to you an intellectual discussion on some higher spiritual topic dealing with the spiritual oneness and unity of existence and all these great ideas. Even intellectually dealing with those subjects is a great practice that can help us to grow intellectually, morally, spiritually, because it's not like reading a sense, some kind of something very simple, like something. There are many people tell you, oh, you put something very, very simple, very simple. There is a great danger, and there is a great, there's a precipice, a hidden trap in being too simple as a pretext, as an excuse for avoiding higher philosophy. It's an important thing. So in modern times, I believe, especially in the IT age, we should try to repair some of the damage done by this ultra utopian, utilitarian, the short term, the result-oriented culture of modern IT age. We have to concentrate on some higher philosophy, transcendental philosophy. It may not give us some extra dollars, may not get you a job, but it can keep our mind on some higher level. It's also needed to keep the human civilization balanced. That's one purpose of this. Okay, thank you. So I think we have come to the end of today's session. We'll continue in the next class. So you can ask any question anytime. If you have any more questions, you're most.
Maharaj, there are a couple more questions, but did you want to continue or no?
There are questions?
Yeah, there are two more.
Yeah, you can, one or two questions. Yeah, we can. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Namaskar, Swamiji. As you would know, Bhagavan Ramana Maharishi also used to say, focus on the self and meditate on the self. And in a conversation, somebody mentioned if that was the same as Aham Brahmasmi. And in response, he made an interesting statement. He said, that is not how the text is to be understood. It simply means Brahman exists as I, and not I am Brahman. So he translates I am Brahma, Aham Brahmasmi as the Brahman exists as I instead of I am Brahman.
Yeah, in the Ramana Maharshi's, that idea, who am I, that idea is directly taken from the Bhashya portion on the 7th mantra of Mandukya Upanishad. 7th mantra of Mandukya Upanishad. It is also the genesis of what is called negative theology in the language of exponents of Master Eckhart's idea, negative dialectic, negative theology. Na prakyam, no veda prakyam, like that it goes. And then he says, this highest truth can only be experienced by constant manana nididhyasana, tracing, making this inquiry, using the path of who am I. So if you go on inquiring to who am I, finally you'll reach experience Advaitam, Shivam Advaitam, Chadutham Manyante, Sa Atma, Savijñeyaha, you find in the 7th mantra of Mandukya Upanishad. So in fact, there are statements on the in the Bhashya of Shankaracharya on the 7th mantra, which literally, in a way, literally, it relates to Ramana Maharshi's teachings. So I think it is not related to Aham Brahmasmi, it's related to the Mahavakya, the 7th mantra of Mandukya Upanishad. Actually, I had given at least some 35 classes, then I couldn't get time on Mandukya Upanishad, Gaudapada Karigas on Mandukya Upanishad, and Shankaracharya's commentary on both. Together, I've expounded this 7th mantra I've discussed very elaborately, reading, explaining every single letter and word of Shankara's commentary. So Actually, Ramana Maharshi's path is, if you continue your inquiry as to who am I with a pure mind, then you find I am the Atman, which is the witness of everything. Then he says the Advaitam, Shantam, Shivam, Advaitam, Chadutham, Manyande, Sa Atma, Sa Vijnana. And Bhashyakara says this inquiry should be made at the internal level, towards our own inner chamber with a pure heart. And who is this real me? There you go beyond this body-mind complex I, but finally you reach this I, the Atman. So if you can just read the Mandukya Upanishad, 7th mantra.
Okay.
Na prajnam, like that. No Veda prajnam, na prajnanaganam, like that. It begins like that.
Thank you.
It's neither the consciousness, the waking state, nor the dream state, nor the Suruti state, nor the combination of both. Like that, it continues like that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the very interesting question, very profound question. Ramana Maharshi, he was a great exponent of this path. So it has a special attraction because in modern times, if one can just move also away from all this plurality, it has got a special attraction. So what Shankaracharya did, he actually built a huge edifice, and also he connected the huge structure with a ladder. So you can go to the nearby temple or church or synagogue or Buddhist God anywhere and do pray. He did that, all the pujas, everything. And also he gave this philosophy. And the Prakarana Grantha, small books are very small, Tattwabodha, Atmabodha, small, tiny like pamphlets. And then huge canonical works also. So in a way, he can say somebody like someone who started a university, a college, kindergarten, and also a nursery institution and Sunday school. All together you find Shankaracharya. Okay. Ramana Maharshi was a great exponent of Advaita, pure Advaita. But he emphasized the conclusion of Advaita. That's an important thing. Ramana Maharshi emphasized the conclusion, the last word in Advaita. That's an important thing. Thank you. Thank you, Christy. Yeah.
David, please go ahead.
Please continue. Please continue. Anyone, please?
David, go ahead, please.
Yeah.
David, there you are.
Yeah.
Hello, Swami. If you have time, I had one question. Is Nirvikalpa Samadhi, I've heard it's necessary, but it seems like that's something, a state. That's not, you said that it's not something, because it's not permanent if it's something that you reach. If Nirvikalpa Samadhi, if I don't have it now and then I gain it later, I'm confused by that because it's not permanent. Like you stated earlier in your lecture, that if something's not permanent, it's not.
Yeah. Okay. So yes. Actually, the Nirvikalpa Samadhi is the 8th stage in Patanjali Yoga Sutra. Yamana, Yamasana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi. Patanjali's Samadhi concept is different from Vedantic concept of Jiva Maikya. They're totally different. Patanjali's concept of Samadhi can only make you ready for higher experience in Vedanta. It is not the same as the higher Jiva Maikya in Vedanta. Two different things. It's a penultimate state. So the point is, you have to, let's say, the scriptures will tell you have to meditate, you have to do japa, you have to go to temple, you have to read books, you have to practice some higher values. Eventually, and maybe not in this life, at some life in distant future, you may reach the highest page experience. True. Now one may ask the question, so this highest spiritual experience in Advaita is a result of all this? Naturally, this is a natural interpretation. It is not, that Vedanta says. Why it is not? So that's a very complicated thing. Why it is not? So all your efforts, all the spiritual disciplines you practice, puja, meditation, confession, Sabbath, whatever it's, all that you do are different ways of removing the dust from the surface of the mirror. Remember. So the cloth with which you clean the surface of the mirror doesn't produce light. But apparently it produces light because the dust is gone, light is there. So you mistook a rope for a snake. You brought a light. And you find it's not a snake, it's a rope. So a child will tell you, because the light came, there is rope. No. Even when you thought it is a snake, it was not a snake. So even if you think that you are only physical, a body-mind complex, you are not a body-mind complex. If your realization of the fact that it was not a snake but a rope, if it were the result of the light that you brought, then that realization will not remain, because even when you switch off the light, still you know it is rope only. Remember, it's an important thing. The effect of a cause is impermanent, because the cause is removed, the effect will not be there. You remove all the clay from a clay pot, there will be no pot. Remove all the gold from a golden ornament, there will be no ornament. So if the cause is removed, effect cannot stand. Similarly, if the spiritual experience is the result of your actions, then that experience cannot be permanent. Remember, an action can be done and withdrawn. So remember that. So that's why moksha akaritva, spiritual liberation is not the effect of a cause. That's why one statement in Shankaracharya's commentary is jnanam ajnana nivartakam na jnana pravartakam. So it says shastram ajnana nivartakam na jnana pravartakam. That also is there. Shastram ajnana nivartakam na jnana pravartakam. What it means is scriptures, light that you bring into the room to find out if there's rope or snake. Scripture. The scripture doesn't create knowledge. The scripture only removes wrong notion from your mind. The light did not create rope. The light only removed the wrong notion that it was a snake. Like that, all spiritual efforts only work as an instrument for removing ignorance from us.
Is
Otherwise,
Nirvikalpa
Nirvikalpa through all the disciplines that take you to the highest spiritual experience. Nirvikalpa Samadhi is understood in Vedanta. All those spiritual disciplines are only removing the wrong notion from your mind that you have got this body-mind complex. Remember, in straight mainstream Vedanta, the Nirvikalpa Samadhi is never used in a way. Vichara. But remember, this is an important thing. Vedanta is very straightforward and very clear-cut. I give the example of the first rank holder, fifth grade student. He has fully established in his fitness to go to the 6th grade. So when a teacher comes and teaches him the first lesson, he understands it because his mind is ready for it. So the teacher doesn't have to explain again in examples. Immediately the student understands. So if you're ready for the highest spiritual experience, even if somebody tells you, if a real teacher tells you it is, that immediately it becomes an experience. It's important. Okay, thank you for the question. Thank you. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tatsat Sri Ramakrishna Paramastu. Thank you.